What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Magicka Nightblade. So the Magicka Nightblade has been on the receiving end of some nerfs in Murkmire. I do believe that these nerfs were actually well warranted for PvE, with Magicka Nightblades outperforming most of the other Magicka DPS specs by a considerable margin. These nerfs kind of brought Magicka Nightblade DPS down to a level where some other DPS specs can feasibly compete with Magicka Nightblades, but they're still among the top of the pecking order when it comes to Magicka DPS classes in terms of ranged DPS, I should mention. Currently, only the Magicka Templar is able to match the Magblade toe for toe when it comes to DPS, although the Magplar's toolkit might not necessarily bring as much utility as a Magicka Nightblade does to a PvE trial. So just like our other build videos, we'll be going over gear, skills, attributes, everything you need to know to basically recreate this build. We will discuss a little bit behind some sort of gear alternatives that you might want to run if you don't have certain DLCs or expansions. And then we'll talk about a rotation, do a little bit of a demonstration of our rotation, and then do a 6-NW parse so you guys can get an idea of where the Magicka Nightblade stands in comparison to the other Magicka DPS. It is important to take note that this particular parse is only going to be comparable to Magicka DPS, not necessarily stamina DPS. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. First with our gear. So our Maelstrom sets pretty much stay exactly the same as they have been ever since Dragon Modes. We have Zaan for the most single target DPS in basically stationary fights where the boss is not moving or you are not moving. And you are not moving, I should say. But if you do need to start moving around because the boss, because of mechanics or because the boss is moving around, then you will need to swap out Zaan with Skoria instead. So those are your two main Maelstrom choices. Like I said, nothing's really changed since Dragon Bones when Zaan was initially released here. For our body set here, we're still going with Siroria. Siroria is still the strongest set for Magicka DPS in the game right now, assuming you are able to maintain very good stacks of the 5-piece bonus here. So I have the perfected version, but you can go with the imperfect version. The difference is going to be that max Magicka bonus on that 5-piece set there. You will need to make sure that if you are using the imperfect set that you do not have any perfect version, any perfect armor pieces, because they do not stack with each other. So you need to have 5 imperfect or 5 perfect. You cannot mix and match them. You will not get that 5-piece bonus that way. Now, my personal recommendation for anybody who wants to use Siroria is to get the Siroria add-on by Wheels. This will help you make it a little bit clearer as to when you can move out of your boon in order to kind of maintain your stacks and things like that. So I find that add-on to be fairly useful whenever I DPS using Siroria. Generally speaking, Siroria is going to be good pretty much across the board in every single fight in the game. There might be a handful of fights where Siroria, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get good uptime on your stacks, but even then Siroria still performs very, very admirably in those certain fights. For our second 5-piece, we're going with Spell Strategist, so we do have 3 spell damage enchants here. Despite the nerf to Magblade Sustain, we are still capable of sustaining our full rotation with 3 spell damage enchants. We did have to make a change in our weapon enchants in order to kind of make up for the sustain, but overall you can still keep your spell damage enchants on your jewelry pieces. So Spell Strategist is going to be our front bar set for this particular build. And I'll go over basically what sets you're going to want to run as your front bar. It's basically going to be either Spell Strategist or Siroria for the most part. You could also use Burning Spellweave as a front bar set as well. And then double Inferno stays front bar and back bar with Infused on both. We have the Maelstrom Inferno on the back bar here, Infused with an Absorb Magicka enchant. This is just to kind of make up for the sustained losses that we happen to get because they increased the cost of Elemental Weapon, they increased the cost of Impale, and they also added a cost onto our bow proc. So it did hit sustain by a pretty hefty margin, so we do need that Absorb Magicka now to kind of make up for it. Now, if you are in a very good group with very good resource support, basically you have a healer that's basically able to feed you orbs every 20 seconds, then it is feasible that you can actually swap this out for a weapon damage enchant or a shock damage enchant, but that's going to be very highly dependent on the group itself. If you basically have the maximum amount of group support going, then it is possible to sustain a full light attack rotation using gold food without the Absorb Magicka enchant. So that's just something you want to keep in mind there. You could also do it with blue food, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult that way. Then for our front bar Infused flame damage enchant here. So they did fix the bug where Siroria was not stacking on your back bar, so you can actually use Siroria front bar here if you would like, so you can switch out these two sets here. So Spell Strategists, you can buy this off of Guild Traders. This is a PvP set that's got obtained from Rewards of the Worthy, so you can buy this off of Guild Traders, so you don't have to worry about having any sort of DLCs in order to get Spell Strategist, and I do highly recommend picking it up because it is a pretty nice set bonus there. Now for our replacement for Siroria, you do need to have Somerset to get Siroria because it does only drop from Cloud Rest. So you basically have two other sets that you, or really three other sets you can wear depending on the DLC and whether you want to farm it or if you want to purchase it. So the first set here is going to be Burning Spellweave. So this is a dropped set, so you need to farm this from City of Ash, either 1 or 2. I personally recommend farming it on 1 because it's just very, very easy, very, very quick. So this can be used either as a front bar set or a body set. It really depends on whether you want to run Spell Strategist front bar or not. This is pretty nice overall when you compare it to Siroria. If you are looking at a very mobile fight, Burning Spellweave does still lose out, but it is going to be a little bit more consistent than Siroria, just based on the the inconsistent stacking of Siroria that way. So it's a very nice set to pick up. I would highly recommend picking up Burning Spellweave, even if you do have access to Cloud Rest for Siroria, for those more mobile fights and fights where you don't think you'll be able to get very high stacks of Siroria. Mother's Sorrow is the other set that you might want to consider picking up. So this was a front bar set in Wolf Hunter, and it can still be a front bar set, but it is more likely it's going to be stronger if you have it as a body set instead, and run something like Burning Spellweave or Spell Strategist as your front bar set instead. So because of the way that Siroria now is maintained on your back bar, you can even run Siroria front bar and have Mother's Sorrow as your body set too. This is a drop set from Deshawn, so it is an overland set, so you can buy this off of Guild Traders, so that just makes it a very easy set to obtain that way. And then the final set, let me see if I don't believe I've pulled it out here. The final set is going to be Master Architect. This is going to be a set that you're going to want to run on your body. So this can be obtained from Halls of Fabrication, which is the trial in Vardenfell. So you will need the Morrowind expansion in order to get this set. But because Nightblades have a 70 ultimate cost ultimate, this basically means you can get very good uptime on Major Slayer. However, most Magicka Nightblades, and in fact I would argue all Magicka Nightblades, have this ultimate Soul Harvest on the back bar, so you will need to run Master Architect on your body rather than your front bar. If you do want to pair this with Siroria, you can certainly do so. You will be losing out on one set bonus though, because you will be doubling up on that Minor Slayer bonus, and those do not stack because they are a minor buff. So those are kind of your gear alternatives there. And I already mentioned for Monster Helm set that instead of Zaan, you can run Skoria if you have to fight a mobile boss, or you yourself are going to be mobile as well. In terms of enchants and traits and things like that, so I have max Magicka enchants on all of my pieces except for my helm. I do like to have one health enchant when I am running blue Witch Mother's Potent Brew or Clockwork Stitches Fillet for the additional health there. Because shields, your main shield now does scale off of health, having higher health is actually going to be more preferable for that additional shield, particularly for progression style runs. Now, if you are running Skoria, Skoria's one piece is max health, so you can actually use Magicka instead. For your large pieces, if you have a Magicka enchant on them, you should go with Infused. Otherwise, you can go with Divine. So you can see here I have Divines on the head piece here because I have a health enchant rather than a Magicka enchant. If this was Skoria, I would actually have Infused Magicka on my head rather than that Divine's health. And then our small pieces are all going to be Divines with max Magicka enchants. For our jewelry pieces, I already mentioned all spell damage glyphs. Enchants, I should say. And then for our traits, you can go with Arcane, or you can go with Bloodthirsty. You can even go with Infused even. So Tabitha has actually kind of redone the math and re-examined the math. We're looking at Infused versus Arcane due to the changes in Minor Sorcery. And it does seem like if you have Minor Sorcery up in your group, so basically if you have a Magplar or a a Templar healer that's able to proc minor sorcery, then Infused will actually end up pulling a little bit ahead of Arcane. You will be giving up some resources though, so Magicka DPS do have 3 options when it comes to jewelry traits now. So it's either going to be Arcane, Infused, or Bloodthirsty. 3 Bloodthirsty is going to be the strongest still, with Arcane and Infused both kind of trailing behind Bloodthirsty. So if you want like a little bit more additional resources, then go with Arcane. If you want a little bit more DPS, but you don't want to run Bloodthirsty, you basically want your DPS to be more consistent throughout the fight rather than having a huge jump at the tail end of the fight, go with Infused. If you just want to maximize DPS and get through Execute as quickly as you possibly can, then go with Bloodthirsty. And then I already mentioned enchants here. Flame on the front, Infused. Absorb magic on the back, Infused. You can replace this with shock or weapon damage if you have very good group support. Now let's go ahead and talk about our character sheet. So we are a Dark Elf here. Dark Elves are going to be one of the strongest races when it comes to Magblades, if not the strongest race here for the additional flame damage that we get. We get 7% additional flame damage, 2% additional shock, and frost damage. We also get 9% max magicka as well as 6% additional max stamina. The other race options are basically going to be High Elves, the Altmer, Bretons, and Argonians are kind of like a very distant 4th option there. So High Elves get 10% max magicka and 9% magicka regen, so they have a little bit of additional sustain here, which might, negate the need for the absorb magicka enchant. However, they only get 4% flame, 4% frost, 4% shock, so the DPS difference is going to be pretty minimal between Dunmer and Altmer. Bretons get 10% max magicka, 3960 spell resistance for some survivability boost, and then they get 3% cost reduction, which is going to be weaker than the regen from the Altmer, but it still helps out with sustain nonetheless. Then Argonians get 9% max health, 3% max magicka. They also get some additional healing received bonuses and healing done, which really helps out your self heals. But the biggest bonus that Argonians bring to the table is that tri-potion passive. Basically, whenever you drink a potion, you gain about 4,000 or so magicka, health, and stamina. So basically, each potion acts as a mini tri-potion. But Argonians are going to lose out in PvE DPS potential, although they are a very powerful choice of race if you also PvP on the side as well. So if you do like the PvP on a Magicka Nightblade, you might want to consider making it an Argonian and just kind of eat that DPS loss in PvE trials. For attributes, 64 into stamina, 0 into health or stamina, 64 into magicka, nothing into health or stamina. You can shift a couple of points from magicka to health if you would like to kind of increase your survivability a little bit. Remember that shields do scale off of your max health now, so you can only have 40% or 50% health shield basically. So the more health you have, the more survivable you are, because you do have a little bit of a larger shield that way. I would not recommend putting more than 10 points into health though, because then at that point you're giving up a little bit too much when it comes to survivability. Or actually not survivability, DPS. For our Mundus Stone, we are going with the Thief. You can go with the Apprentice if you would like, or the Lover if you are not going to hit the penetration cap with the Lover. If you are going to hit the penetration cap with the Lover though, the Thief and the Apprentice are both very strong. They pretty much are neck and neck when it comes to DPS. I believe the Apprentice is mathematically just a little bit stronger, so it's kind of up to you which one that you want to choose, but any DPS difference you see is going to be probably more attributable to things like rotation and things like that rather than the actual Mundus choice itself. For food, we're running Clockwork Citrus Fillet here for the additional sustain boost. If you don't have the money or the means to get Clockwork, then you can go with Witch Mothers instead, which is a far easier option to get. And then I also mentioned you can run blue food. Magicka Nightblades are able to sustain a full light attack rotation with blue food, assuming that you get very good group support. So things like Worm, Orbs on cooldown, things like that. That's pretty much the only way. This is one of the only classes that can actually sustain that sort of rotation with blue food. Now for our skills, starting off with our front bar here, we have Impale, Elemental Weapon, Crippling Grasp, Merciless Resolve, Inner Light, and Fiery Rage here. You can replace Elemental Weapon if you would like with Swallow Soul for some additional healing done. Now Swallow Soul will only heal you, unlike in Wolf Hunter where it would heal one other person, so this is more if you need that additional self-heal. And if you don't need this additional DPS, then you can go with the other more funnel health, which will heal other people as well, but you will be doing half as much damage with that morph compared to Swallow Soul. So you will be eating a DPS loss for the additional healing off heals. For our back bar, this is where your shield would be. We have Elemental Drain for the Parse, but this is where we would put either morph of annulment. So Harness Magicka will give you a 40% damage shield and a little bit of sustain whenever you get hit by a spell. Dampen will give you 50% damage shield, however. So you can go with either morph. The tooltips are not correct right now. But I personally prefer Dampen Magic for the larger damage shield, but Harness is still a pretty decent choice as well, so you can pick whichever one you'd like. Then we have Twisting Path, Blockade of Fire, Siphoning Attacks, Rearming Trap, and Soul Harvest. Now, instead of Rearming Trap, because this does require you to be at melee range and be able to obviously have something hit the trap, you can go with Channeled Acceleration instead. If you need to play at range or anything like that, then obviously you won't be able to use Trap. In this case, just run at Channeled Acceleration instead. But I would recommend running Trap if you can, because it uses your secondary resource rather than Magicka. So that just helps out your sustain by a little bit here. Alright, going over our champion points. The CP cap is 810, which gives us 270 across each of the different constellation types. So starting with our green CPs, we have 75 into Arcanist, 75 into Tenacity. That leaves 120 points, which you can put across the remaining nodes really however you'd like. You can even push these two nodes up to 100 for that last percentage point if you would prefer. I have 40 Shadow Ward, 40 Tumbling, and then 40 Warlord though. For our blue CPs, I do want to mention here that this particular setup is optimized for a well-optimized raid group. So we have things like Alkosh, we have Torx Crusher, we have Minor Breach. So if you do not have good uptimes on any of those, then it might be worth looking at other ways to get to the penetration cap. So you might want to run something like the Lover if you don't have Alkosh. Might want to put a couple of points into Spell Erosion to kind of make up for lost uptime. So it's kind of up to you. The key point is just try to hit that penetration cap of 18,200 with your debuffs and penetration. So we have 72 into Elfborn, 64 into Ellie Expert, 28 into Spell Erosion, 72 Master at Arms, 3 into Staff Expert, and 31 into Thaumaturge. Now you can drop Elfborn to 66 to get some more points into Spell Erosion if you'd like. You can drop Master at Arms down to 66 and get rid of everything in Staff Expert for another 9 points into Spell Erosion if you need it. So that's kind of where you would put those points, get those points if you do need to invest a little bit more into Spell Erosion there. Oh, I forgot our red CPs. So I take a one-size-fits-most approach when it comes to red CPs, at least for this kind of generic build. But for the specific trials, you will need to basically, if you do want to maximize mitigation, you will need to shift some points around. I have 81 Ironclad, 61 Thick-Skinned, and 64 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. This is a balanced approach, like I said. So again, if you need to shift these points around to make up for content stuff, then go ahead and do that. Do want to mention here, Quick Recovery. You can put 10 points into Quick Recovery, and you can get the Field Physician passive here, which gives you 15% damage reduction while you're resurrecting another player. Very nice to have for progression style guilds. If you are in one of those score running guilds, first of all, why are you watching this video still? You already know what you got to do. In those scenarios, that additional resurrection is not going to be very useful because chances are you just reset if somebody dies. But this is a nice passive to pick up just because you will be resurrecting fairly often as a Magicka DPS because you do happen to have shields. Alright, so that is pretty much it for build information. Now let's go ahead and talk about our rotation itself. So Nightblades have a dynamic rotation. What this means is because our dots do not line up very well, and also because we have that bow proc here with Merciless Resolve, we will have kind of offset dots here and there, which means our rotation is not going to be static. It's not going to be something like do this, then do that, then do this, then do that. It's going to be very much adaptation to the scenario at hand. So you're going to see a lot of bar swapping with Nightblades. So if those of you guys who have inconsistent lag ping issues, you have lag issues, this might not be a good class for you to run. So generally speaking, you want to maintain siphoning attacks now. Now prior to Murkmire, before they nerfed sustain for Magicka Nightblades, you can kind of have this off, but now you do want to re-up it as soon as you can. And then from there, obviously, you want to get your bow proc off as quickly as you can because you will not generate stacks for the next bow proc until you get rid of your current one. So right when you hear that bow proc go off or you see it go off, use it right away so you're able to start building up stacks for the next bow proc. Your goal should be to hit at least 3 bow procs per activation of Merciless Resolve. That's going to be kind of the sweet spot there when it comes to how many bow procs you should be getting. So just quickly going over our rotation. So I like to, obviously you want to start off with buffs, so you want to have Siphoning and Merciless Resolve. Start off with your Might of Force as well. You can see here I just used a bow proc right away. The bow proc does take precedence over reapplying dots, so it's okay to let your dots kind of run out a little bit if it means that you're going to get that bow proc off. Make sure to re-up Merciless Resolve as well if you have like 2 or 3 seconds left on it, just so that way you don't run out. So this is what I mean when I say you kind of have a dynamic rotation. As you can see there, I didn't really have like step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of rotation. It was basically, okay, what dot is about to run out? I swap, reapply that dot. Oh, I have a bow proc coming up. Use that bow proc, go back to reapplying my dot, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of it's really hard for me to kind of explain what the rotation is without actually doing it, because it's very dynamic. It changes pretty much every single rotation that you do, every single parse that you do. If I were to write out the rotation for Magicka Nightblade, like second for second, piece by piece, it would be something like a 35-step process until you get to repeat itself again. So in that so that's what I mean when I say that we have a very dynamic rotation. Alright, so with that all said and done, let's go ahead and do a 6-man dummy parse so you guys get an idea of the DPS we're able to pull. Now, I did mention this earlier and I will repeat this again. The parse that you see here should only be compared to Magicka DPS, specifically range DPS. I would not necessarily compare this to a Magicka DK. And this is just because you kind of want to take into consideration what spot you'll be taking up. So Magicka DK will be taking a melee spot, so obviously you don't want to necessarily be comparing to that when you yourself will be taking a range spot. So you want to compare to range DPS. So those will be things like a Bobo Warden, Magicka Templars, Magicka Sorcerers, things like that. So that's just something to keep in mind here. So let's go ahead and get started with this parse here. And all right. A lot of pre-buffing that you have to do as a Magicka Nightblade. See here, I did let Path drop off, so that way I can get my bow proc off. Forgot to mention ultimate order. So use your Destro ulti when you need cleave. If you can get within melee range, then you should be using Soul Harvest instead. Obviously, if you're using Master Architect as one of your sets, then you obviously want to use Soul Harvest as your only ultimate. But if you do need that cleave, then just go with the Destro ulti, or if you are at range, then use the Destro ulti. Otherwise, you will be using Soul Harvest as your primary ultimate. See here that I am basically keeping a very close eye on my dots. So for those of you guys on PC, definitely want to pick up a dot tracker like Strendar or Action Duration Minder, maybe even both. And then when we get down to Execute, which is going to be 25% health remaining, we only maintain Blockade now. We drop Crippling Grasp and Path. We keep up Leeching and your source of Minor Force as well as Merciless Resolve for that Minor Berserk. The only doubt we're maintaining now is going to be Blockade. Alright, so there we go. So that is our Magicka Nightblade parse. So you can tell here from the numbers that we are still pretty much right at the top when it comes to Magicka DPS. Magicka Templars are the only ones who can pull toe-to-toe with Magicka Nightblades when it comes to DPS itself. Do keep in mind that Magicka Nightblades do have a source of Minor Berserk with the Merciless Resolve here. So, you know, if we take a look here at Minor Berserk, we do have 97% uptime here. So something to keep in mind. So when you do take a look at something like a Magplar or Magicka Sorcerer, just add on about 8% additional DPS to kind of make up for that, and you can get an idea of where that particular class sits when compared to a Magicka Nightblade. But even if you take into consideration Minor Berserk, again, only Magplars are the ones that are capable of touching what a Magicka Nightblade is able to pull, both in trials and in on dummy parses here. And now, just taking apart our combat metrics report, light attacks are going to be a little bit overrepresented in a parse, just because you're not to play mechanics. So light attacking is pretty prevalent here. So you can see here we have 117 hits out of 123 seconds in combat. So our weaving was pretty much on point. We didn't miss a single weave there. And you can see that some of this is going to be dependent on crit chance. So when we crit with our Impale, we were hitting for about 70k with our max crit. So sometimes you get lucky with crit chance, sometimes you won't. So you can see here we got pretty much slightly above average crits with Impale. We got about average crits with our bow procs, so pretty decent parts here. So this is fairly representative. Now you can see here that Absorb Magic, the glyph itself actually does a fairly decent amount of damage. So we got about 2.4k DPS. And we also gain 190 additional regen from the Absorb Magicka glyph going off. So it's really nice to have that additional regen here. You can tell that just looking here, that's about 250 or so disparity between regen restrain per second. So having that Absorb Magicka glyph really helps out with that sustain, and a lot of Magicka Nightblades are running this just because it's really hard to maintain a full light attack rotation unless you have basically the best group support there is. So that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know down in the comment section below if you guys have any questions or comments about this build, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.